Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome to episode 13. Today, at least in our time zone, is Star Wars Day.
Point.
So may the 4th be with you for those of you who celebrate Star Wars Day. So thank you, everyone, for joining us.
And for also the non-Star Wars believers. Everyone's accepted here.
Everyone's accepted here, including a wonderfully close friend of mine, Tashar, who we are dubbing the librarian for the evening, for his encyclopedic knowledge of just generally amazing, nerdy culture, from Star Wars to Warhammer to Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. We're going to be talking all sorts of like world building, lore, and role playing, not just necessarily at the table, but in video games and all of that sort of stuff tonight. But also, as always, Thea, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Oh, always good to be here. I am OMGM, hopefully not a surprise to anybody. I'm wondering, though, did our dear librarian know that they were to be known as the librarian tonight? Or is
I did. The librarian chose the librarian's name.
I love it.
The librarian was consulted, he made a decision, and he enacted it. Excellent.
I do like action. And cameras and lights. Wait, that's not lore. That's not all things RPGs. That's a movie. Why would I think of a movie right now? But yes, hello. Welcome. It's lovely to be here. Hello to our first-time chatters. Voluminous idiot. Except that you're a bot. And Talworth. I'm going to take care of the bot. Jared, would you like to introduce a most wonderful, what we're going to do tonight, why we're here, why we're not talking TTRPG, D&D only? I just headbutted D and Dog.
Oh, no. Well, I mean, we're here to talk about role-playing games. We're here to talk about culture and community. And I think one of the most passionate, wonderfully nerdy and just so, what's the word, rich communities is the Star Wars community. It's obviously much, much bigger than Dungeons and Dragons. We've only just got our own legitimate film.
That's a bold claim.
That is a bold statement.
I would say it's definitely more broad because it's more well known, but saying it's got as many, that's a tricky.
I mean, here's the thing, right? You do Dungeons and Dragons, you do and play role-playing games, you enjoy Star Wars, and then there have been games that have come from that, including a tabletop role-playing several tabletop
so
role-playing
systems, I believe. So what you're saying is it's multi-channel is Star Wars, whereas...
we haven't opened up more media in role-playing games as much. There haven't been quite as many. There's been video games because it is, again, the original role-playing game, whatever that now translates into in the form of Dragon Age or even The Witcher or something.
Yeah. But suffice to say, we are going broader this evening. And I think it's probably a good thing. We don't really want to get stuck in a little silo. But I think it's also important that we talk about the fact that people who play tabletop RPGs usually have very broad interests, and you get into it in many, many different ways. And so I think that's why we got our guest here. I'm pretty sure that's why we black bagged him. Okay, I think that was the point.
No,
I'm not sure if there is a ransom. He's in his own home.
There was no ransom. There was a threat. There was a threat against my precious one.
Yes. No.
A threat to steal her love from me.
I mean, to be fair, I've seen your version of D and Dog, and I would steal as well. But yes, we're here to talk. We're here to talk things more broadly. Immediately, I forget how to speak and put sentences together. That's not fine. Unusual.
That's fine.
What are we going to talk about? How are we going to start?
Tasha, do you want to tell us? Let's just recap. Let's start from what kind of role-playing games experience you've had. How did you get there? Let's start there and branch from there.
Sure. Well, so as most people do, I've played D&D for several years now. But the thing that I think is interesting about my journey is that most people that I know, they start playing Dungeons and Dragons in school, at uni, wherever it might be, with friends and family. And then, once they've gotten really in depth with the game and they understand the mechanics of it, is where they sort of start going into more of the lore keeping aspects, reading deeper lore, and then trying the different channels like role-playing games and movies and that sort of thing. For me, it was actually the other way around. I started off playing tabletop games, specifically Warhammer. Love Space Marines, which, by the way, is a reference for librarians, by the way. I like to think of myself as a Space Marine librarian. But it started off with tabletop, expanded into computer games, Dragon Age, Mass Effect, Witcher, pretty much any game's got RPG elements to it. I could see how they all had the same sort of basic system of building up a character's statistics, portraying seeing yourself as that character, and making that character do things the way that you would do it. Because one of the things that I really like about all role-playing games is that you can tailor your characters the way you would want them to. Whether that might be creating an entirely blank character like you do in Dragon Age, where there's no pre-existing history, and you can make a character as good or as evil or as mean as you want to. Or when you take a pre-existing character like Geralt from The Witcher or Commander Shepard from Mass Effect, where you can tailor your character to do certain things and certain actions, but they're still their own character. You know, everyone will recognize elements of Commander Shepard, no matter how much they might vary the decisions they play in a game. Everyone knows who Commander Shepard is, but not everyone will know who your character in Dragon Age is. So that level of freedom is something I really enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. I've definitely enjoyed some of the D&D role-playing games, and I haven't played Dragon Age, but there's also been the Divinity Original Sin Series 1 and 2. We played, Mitch and I played multiple games of that, and it's very in depth. And now they're the creators who've made Baldur's Gate 3. So effectively, they've come from creating video games to creating a D&D product, but that is so heavily character creation, that experience. You meet obviously the same NPCs and characters along the way, but you're definitely not about to have a much more recognizable experience because it isn't just narrative driven. It's far more exploration and more tabletop like, I guess.
Exactly. And that's, I think, is what's the most fun of any role-playing game, is that you can have people who just want something quick and fast. They can take a pre-existing character and run how they think that character would run. Or you can do what I like to do, which is build a character from the ground up. I mean, one example that just springs to mind now is you mentioned you and Mitch played Divinity. I remember, Mitch, way back, we were discussing how we create characters, you know, when you can create your character's appearance and that sort of thing. And Mitch always said he just picked the first default appearance, stuck a helmet on it, and went from there.
That's what he does.
Whereas I can sometimes spend close to 30 minutes on a game perfecting exactly what my character looks like, getting the scars 100%. Just right. And it's not just cosmetic. Like I'll have a character in my mind. So for example, my Templar characters, my paladins, will have a lot of scars on their bodies because they're frontline warriors. My mage and my clerics will have far fewer scars, either because they heal themselves or because they're not taking that sort of combat. So I design their appearance based on their background or my imagined background for that character.
I mean,
and who they're going to be.
Yeah, it sounds like that's actually a part of the enjoyment for you as well, because I know some people can be a little bit dismissive of people that spend a lot of time on character creation, and I know there are some people who think that that's probably one of the most important parts of the game, but to me it sounds like you kind of craft the lore and the story as soon as you start creating your character. Would that be a fair thing? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Whenever I start a game or a D&D campaign, I go into it with a very clear idea. Either if I'm using an existing character, I know how they're going to react in this new situation, or if I'm creating a new one, even if it's just for a quick one-day campaign, I'll create a backstory for them and why they're in this situation. It's character creation for me is a big thing. I love doing it. I love it.
Where do you get your ideas from?
Cliches, copies and paste from various sources. Originally, so for example, my very first Dungeons and Dragons character, like my proper pen and paper Dungeons and Dragons character, I completely froze up when we were doing character creation. So basically what I came up with was Ragnar from Vikings, except he's now a druid. Like I even used a picture of the character from the TV show and said, this is my character, he's a druid, and go with it.
Nice.
And I use that.
So put like a feathered hat on as opposed to a helmet onto the character.
Exactly.
But the reason I bring that up, because sometimes people who might watch this and get involved in TTRPGs feel insecure about character creation or insecure about backstory. I know that some of the players that I've had, it's like, I can't come up with a backstory. I don't really know. And I think it's really good to say, hey, you can take an existing character, put your own spin on it, or feather or hat, and you can still create a really meaningful story from there.
Exactly. And the thing I really enjoy the most is getting people who are nervous of that process and then seeing them get into it. Like, as an example, the first time I tried to get my family to play Dungeons and Dragons, I'm not the best game master because I was just I was learning the game at the time, so I was literally going, how does this work? Okay, that's how it works. So the thing is, my parents, being from a different generation, they didn't really get into it. Like they thought it was interesting, but they couldn't maintain the interest for a full day campaign or something.
Yeah.
My sister, on the other hand, doesn't really play the game, but she loves creating characters over and over again.
Okay.
I think a favorite character was a tiefling, female tiefling sorceress was her favorite character. The first one she ever created. She doesn't have a name for the character, but that's her first character. Yeah. And that's the one she likes to use when we play games.
That's funny. You get really attached to some of your first characters. I remember the character I created when I first got back into playing after having a bit of a break. 4 point. Anyway, when I got that character, I still really like that character. It's a Goliath cleric. She's got low dex. She's fantastic. She aggressively hugs people. Doesn't understand the notion of consent, but that's how she manages to win a lot of her battles. Come here, you need a hug. I am very much attached to that character and her story. So I think that those first characters do make a real impression, hey?
Oh, true. Oh, definitely. I mean, it took me a while. Like when I first started playing tabletop games, it took me a while to actually create a character distinct from mine. Because the thing is, like, taking Mass Effect, for example.
Yeah.
You create your own version of a preset character. So you can change Commander Shepard, you can change their appearance, you can change their gender, you can change the backstory, but they still have the same voice, the same mannerisms. And the thing is, a lot of people say, one of the fun things of these sort of games is you can take the same character and run them through a different set of scenarios by doing different decisions in your game. And yet somehow I keep finding myself drawn back to the one version of the character that resonates the most with me. No matter how hard I try, like if I make them do something against my vision of the character, I'm very clearly going off script and breaking my vision of the character. So that's something I struggle with sometimes, is getting out of that mold of what my character should be like.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting difference between your computer RPGs and your tabletop RPGs, because obviously in a game, there are, as wonderful as some of those branching decisions might go, there is only a finite amount of scenarios that they can be thought of. Is that something that you noticed going between the two? And how do you find that? Or are you able to just kind of divorce yourself and just get into the media that you're playing?
I generally do find it very easy to just kind of cut away from the RPG aspects and play the games when I want to.
Yeah, okay.
That being said, I have noticed that the biggest advantage of the tabletop game, of any tabletop game, is that your scenarios are only limited by the dungeon master or the game master's imagination, or something they might be triggered by. Whereas with a computer game, as amazing as it might be to play, 20 different pathways, the thing is that because it's a game and it was created at one time, once you've done a run through of every single decision and every combination, there's nothing more you can do. You've got let's say 20 pathways and 20 decisions, so you could have 400 variations. Once you've done those 400, though, that's it. There's no way to change it beyond that. Whereas with the tabletop, it's pretty much infinite. Someone will come up with something.
And generally, they will come up with something that the game master has not anticipated. Let's be honest. Yeah. I noticed we've got a couple of people in chat and asking some questions. And I think it was sort of talking about character creation, and it's saying, do you ever derive a character from a desire to use certain game mechanics? And I think that's really interesting.
Never on my first. So I'm the sort of person who kind of goes through multiple runs of a game. I mean, I think I've created about 20 characters for Dragon Age and about 5 or 6 different versions of Commander Shepard as examples.
We're not sponsored, by the way.
Yeah, I think we're a bit past that part with those guys now. Those games are old now.
Yep.
But the thing is, like the first few times I run a game, no, it's all about story-driven decisions for me. So my character will I'll play my characters in a way that I think is cool.
Yep.
Then after a while, I'll start sort of metagaming and going, okay, I know that there's a lot of fire enemies in this next section, so I'm going to gear up with ice weapons, as an example. But I won't do that in my first few run throughs. I'll focus more on story rather than gameplay.
That
D&D, like in my experience, role-playing players don't do that, and I feel like I've always wanted that. And there's a game that's come out recently where you literally just have a basic elemental weapon, but you have to just pick and choose, and you will go into it narratively the first time, and then the mechanics come in. Whereas I don't know, like, do role-playing games do that? Do any role-playing games kind of hold your hand story-wise and introduce you mechanics, or do they,
well.
through a curveball, like, or do you need to worry about the rules? I've just been walking a new player, like, Sim through a level up now. It's been a big level up for him, so he's just kind of mulling his way through it, and he loves who he is, and now it's all about choosing the mechanics after the fact. So I've got another veteran player helping him out. So yeah, to answer the chat question as well.
I actually wonder about that, though, even with us, because I don't know if people in chat remember, we actually wasn't even on this channel. We played a level 20 game. And one of the reasons we did that is we actually wanted to test out level 20 characters, which is not so much so going into, I want to test the mechanics of the game. But I think that there are times when you do that. But from the same token, roleplay was very important. I think we're very similar in terms of the types of players. We like the backstory. I'm still bitter that most of my backstory didn't come out. But I think that it's interesting. And I don't know if it's so much about not playing to test mechanics, because as a GM, if I get to play, I'm going to try and do something cool. And it's usually within the mechanics of the game. So I don't know if I don't know if that would ever be my first priority, but it certainly influences certain choices I might make in character creation. Would you think that?
I feel honestly, I feel like that comes more from the game master perspective, because I don't do game master stuff much. I only ever play as a player. So from my point of view, although having said that, again, I should also clarify that unlike a lot of people, I usually play games on easy or normal. I very rarely go for the high difficulty setting, because when I play games, I'm not playing to struggle. I'm playing a power fantasy, right? So I want my character, I want my mage, for example, to be able to summon a storm of lightning and blow up 50 enemies. I don't want him to have to struggle to bring them down. Some people do. Some people like the challenge of struggling. So the people who play on the highest difficulties might go for a lot more metagaming, maximizing their damage and the way they play the game. But for someone like me, who's very much more interested in the story of a game and doesn't focus too much on hard gameplay, I think it's less important. So that might be a factor as well.
I think that's a really interesting point. It's about the value that people get out of games and what it is that they're going there for. And I mean, I think that reflects on what is important to people and more in general. But that idea that, some people want that struggle. Some people want to overcome something that is difficult. And I think I agree with you from a gut feel perspective that people who do want to do that probably are more likely to test the mechanics and try and put the rules together. And that's 100% a totally valid way to play. I think it's really important that if it's a group game, people understand what the group wants to get out and what each other do, because I think that can lead to some problems where you have someone who loves the mechanics and testing them, playing with someone who's just there for the story. And I think sometimes that can clash. Is that something, how does that sort of resonate with you, Tasha?
No, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I've frequently, Jared can confirm this, I frequently get frustrated with the competitiveness of some of our fellow gamers, particularly for online games, which is why when I game, 80 to 85% of my gaming, I would say, is me playing a single player story driven game. I've since the start of COVID, I've started getting more into online gaming, but there's a very clear level of skill between myself and someone who games online frequently. So just as an example, when Chef and I play Rocket League every once in a while,
Yep.
they've played more hours than I have on an online game. So there's a very clear scale where they're a lot better than I am, just because they're more used to playing against a human opponent, whereas I play against the story, against the game's AI. So that also creates its own challenges. But the advantage of that is that I can play how I want. If I'm finding it too hard, I'll pull the difficulty down, get through a challenge, push it back up again. Whereas on an online game, you can't do that, and then you have people rage quitting and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they try to make it as a level playing field as possible, but that's exactly it is. As a online gamer, as Tushar said, like a lot of my gaming is competitive stuff. I do enjoy solo video gaming as well, but tabletop is obviously my priority. If I can get some of that kind of good tabletop experience, especially live these days, I'm really enjoying it. But I guess to kind of swing that in the tabletop direction, your DM is your gauge and like how difficult they establish and like set expectations. In my game this week, I pummeled my players. I beat the absolute living daylights out of them.
He says with relish.
And it was seriously intense. It got to the point where it was heads and hands, and then everybody stood up around the table. And it was so impactful because we'd played about 10, 13 sessions, and it had never been an insane threat. It was never deadly enough. Like somebody would got knocked down occasionally. I had 3 out of 4 players unconscious at one point. So and I feel like I was too close to the sun in a way. Like it was maybe too risky to come in with more of an intention to get that impactfulness. So in terms of difficulty,
But I think though with you, like you're playing with a group that you know very well, and going back to talking about what people want to get out of games, I think that you derive a level of satisfaction from running games of really running a good story where stakes feel real.
Yes,
and I think
they're invested.
Yeah, they're invested. Whereas I contrast that to a game that I actually played once, and it was like a come along and pay to play type thing with some people, but they knew I was a GM and a DM, and it was sort of a little bit into the story towards the end of the game. Great, tomb, lots of things trying to kill us all. We had a couple of beholders, and the DM had said to me at the start of the game, "Oh, you're a DM. I'm not going to go easy on you." And I ended up petrified at the start of the combat and could do nothing for the entire thing.
Whoa.
And I didn't find that as stakes. I found that really irritating. And I think that if you looked mechanically, it's very much the same thing, real stakes, high difficulty. But for me, because it wasn't done, I think, I can't read this person's mind, because I think it was done without that broader concept of story. And what they wanted to get out of it was the rules and, making sure that, So I think that really changes the perception and the experience as a player.
Your reaction to that, again, like you just said, very, very wisely, you couldn't have known their intentions or what their thoughts were, but mechanically and what you experienced as a person contributing to the overall experience was a lack of agency. And that is a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
Because I give my players an insane amount of agency. If they literally wanted to tell me they were going to the bathroom to do business, I'd be like, okay, cool. Like if they want to be that granular and if they want to, and I let them, because it means that they're actually telling that character's story and they're not just reacting.
Yeah.
So
that idea of agency is really interesting when you go back to computer games and RPGs, because as we said, there is limited agency. I'm a Mac person, so actually playing a lot of these games is a challenge for me. But Tushar, as someone who does play this, do you ever experience frustration about agency? I mean, is that even a way you'd frame it?
Yes, in specific circumstances, yes. So the games that I've enjoyed the most are the games that pretty much take an open world and let you do what you want to do within it. It'll throw up challenges and let you solve them in, well, for example, let's contrast something like Dragon Age to a game like Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed, which also has some elements of RPG to it. It's not what people don't think of Assassin's Creed when you say RPG, but it does have an element of that in terms of you have a character, you're building up their skills, and you're taking them through a story. Now, with Assassin's Creed, for example, everything is very, very focused on the linear narrative, right? There's not much room to branch out into different stories. You're following a set storyline. But the mechanics in that game are give you incredible agency, and it's kind of the backbone of Assassin's Creed. Is it gives you that agency to move around and do what they call black box missions. So you'll get a target and you have to kill that target, but the game gives you pretty much any number of ways. You can follow sneaky pathways. You can break in through a window. You can charge through a group of enemies and kill every single one of them and hack down your target last second. And the game lets you do that. So from a gameplay point of view, there's tremendous agency, but it's always going to end with you killing that person, right?
Yeah.
And then there's games like Dragon Age and Mass Effect where you have more agency in the decisions you take, but not so much in how you'll enact them. So you'll always fight through a group of enemies to get to someone, and then you're given the choice of killing them or freeing them or enslaving them, and then that leads you through another set of branches. And BioWare games in particular are really good at this. So Mass Effect, Dragon Age, the original game they did, Knights of the Old Republic, which I forgot to mention considering it's Star Wars. I should have mentioned that.
I know.
But yeah.
Perfect segue.
Yes, but
We so could have planned that.
I know, I should have planned. But Knights of the Old Republic was one of the first. I think Baldur's Gate and Knights of the Old Republic were like the first generation RPG computer games, and they sort of set up the ground systems that would then lead to the more detailed ones later on. And again, a lot of agency in what you can do, a lot of ways that you can link games to games. So I think I personally haven't had that issue, but then I also I look for different things when I'm playing.
It actually brings up a really interesting question, and I'm going to apologize for Dean Dog, who clearly has opinions on Dragon Age. What makes an RPG? Because as you were talking about Assassin's Creed and branching and options, I thought of Hitman and the Hitman series, and particularly with the later Hitmans, there are huge numbers of options on how you accomplish your mission, even, if you want to do it in a particular way. Is Hitman and games like it an RPG?
Absolutely.
I would say so. I mean, I had this discussion with a friend of mine at work recently. So his opinion was that an RPG game is one where you build a character from the ground up, and you have stats that you have to take care of. Strength, charisma, whatever it might be. But my argument to him, my debate with him was that yes, that is an RPG, but it's not the only version. I mean, Assassin's Creed, my opinion is that an RPG is any game where you take control of what a character does in a storylines, in a narrative way. So that's, and so like some of the original Assassin's Creed, the very first few games, very linear. There was one way to do things. There were other ways you could do it, but there's only one way that the game wants you to do something, and then to do it another way, you kind of have to break the game's mechanics a little bit. Like one of the games, you're supposed to get into a closed room to kill a character, but there's a glitch in the game where you can actually fall through the ceiling. Now now someone who's more interested in the mechanics will use that glitch and get in and bypass 20 guards. Someone more interested in the narrative of a game will go through the correct pathway. And the thing is, more and more in the game industry, you're getting that sense of choice. People want choice now in their games. They want agency. So even the newest trilogy of Assassin's Creeds, your characters have now gained the ability to have dialogue options in discussions, which they never had in the past. But the last two games had dialogue choices, which is a very, very controversial decision. Because a lot of the fans of the games, their opinion is that the companies are trying to go RPG light. They're not fully committing to an RPG. They're not fully committing to an action game. They're kind of trying to get both, and they're not getting the balance right.
It's really interesting, isn't it? And I kind of go back to what you said about, for some people in RPG, you have stats and all of that sort of thing. And it's almost coming down to there's like tribalism and siloing and protecting of this is an RPG and nobody else can, this is not an RPG because you don't have stats, or this is an action shooting game because, despite the fact that there is a narrative story and you can make stories and you can have the end of the story not turn out the way you want it to, it's not an RPG without stats. It's a first person shooter, for example. So I think that's a really interesting conversation that probably goes further than just gaming. It actually goes into that identity kind of who do you identify? Tribes. Who am I? Who are my people?
Yeah, like, are you
Yeah.
bringing a personality into it? Like, I would even argue that, the aspect of tabletop role playing games that we call role play is generally the social aspect. It's the speaking in character, doing what your character would do,
Yeah.
making a decision based on a motivation, based on a thing that happened in your backstory, and that's who that person is, and who that character is. So if you're going to do that in a video game, the Hitman thing, you're consistently being and fulfilling a role and acting out what that person should and would do, both mechanically, but then I guess, if you're thinking of something more customizable, like these Dragon Age, Baldur's Gate, or these other video games, and where you get to do the minutiae of your, is the tattoo option on the neck in Cyberpunk really that important when you're going to be decked out in all sorts of cool stuff? No, but when you're creating that character, you had to do that at some point.
Yeah,
so
you had to
what
choose
expression is your character? It's a digital thing on a screen that you're probably going to see once when you change a helmet or something.
Yeah.
But
or when the game glitches and you see everything and all the YouTube videos get demonetized.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, to me, I think a role-playing game is more about, like, you can turn it into that. Because to show you've played Tarkov with Mitch and I, and you know that we can get real silly with characters.
Oh, yes.
Because it's immersive for us. Because at the end of the day, we do play it for fun. It's a hardcore game, Tarkov. There's so many rules and minutiae and things you have to keep track of to show as a little Bambi that we take through the wilderness. But it is a first-person shooter from the ground up.
And Tarkov is a good example of that as well.
Yeah, boy, do we love the lore and acting out these characters in the world and doing things with intent. Like, if we go and do a certain mission, we'll gear up a certain way, but we'll also act a certain way. So always a bit of both.
And that actually leads back to what I was saying earlier about, online gamers versus casual. Like, for example, when Mitch and Jared play Tarkov, for them, it's a role-playing exercise. They're very into it, into the lore, into the building of the characters. I literally go along, I pick up a gun and I go, right, I'm a third set of eyes and a sacrificial person when we're charging down the doors. Because the thing is, as much as I've tried, when I play Tarkov, I play for the interaction with my teammates and, to have fun and shoot something. But my character in Tarkov, to me, is not a character. It's a simulation of what I'm doing on the screen. It's not a character to me. And that might be because Tarkov, the world, doesn't appeal, or it might be because the game doesn't appeal. I don't know, but it changes the mindset. I don't care about my character dying, whereas they would very much care about their characters dying.
Yeah, that's really interesting because we talked a little bit about, character creation and how that can really add to the enjoyment of a role play game. And it's almost sounding like it's how much of yourself you put into that character. Not that, and I'm sure nobody has ever tried to build themselves in a video game or in D&D. However, because you can make things very different, but it's not about putting you as the character. It's putting that emotional work into building that character and that kind of, but then again, and now I'm going to contradict myself. I go back to sometimes you get people when they're just starting in D&D cons. We talk a lot about playing games at cons. We give people pre-gen characters. They're not that invested. They had nothing to do with creating that character. And yet that is still an RPG. So it's going to differ across people. I'm just turning myself in circles, trying to think out loud. It's never smart.
I get what you mean as well. And the thing is, I do agree to that to a point because, again, I keep going back to this one, but going back to Dragon Age, for example, right? The first time I played the game, it was very much a self-insert. I was going, okay, this is me in this world. This is, and I tried to build a character that, as much as the game systems, because it's a 2009 game, still fantastic graphics. As much as the game allowed, I tried to recreate myself in the game and go, okay, this is me, and this character will do what I would do in the game. And then through multiple replays, the character's name didn't change, and the way he looked slowly adjusted. And gradually, over three or four run-throughs of the game, I found that this character who started as a self-insert had taken on his own identity. He was no longer me. He was very similar to me. Like, he did things the way I would do them. But there was some place where I'm going, I wouldn't do this, but you know what? This guy's ruthless enough that he would do it. He would
Yeah.
do this action, so he's going to do some. My character in Dragon Age
It becomes a version of.
took on his own life. He became his own person, his own
That's so sick.
identity, and
In a way, it's kind of like
me,
if you
but
were
also himself.
inserted into that world, would that have been who you'd become, kind of a thing?
Precisely,
Could have been
exactly.
an exercise in that. Yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
That's fascinating because I think as someone who who runs a lot of games, doesn't play a lot of like role play games online. If I am playing a character, I, on reflection, have difficulty separating. All of my characters have got an essential bit of my values in them. I don't think I've ever created a character that had values very different to mine. And that's possibly an experience thing. I'm probably very immature as a player in terms, and I mean that I don't get to play enough to develop that. But even thinking about the only the last RPG I played online was Little Misfortune, which is a little indie game. Even then, the choices that I was making was like, I'd make this choice. So that's an interesting reflection on, experience playing and how that affects your ability to differentiate the characters and move it further away from yourself.
And what you just said as well just triggered something that I remembered is that so with the Mass Effect series, so for those who are not familiar with it, you have a character who's got so you can basically make three decisions, right? You can decide what their personal background is. Are they spacer? Are they colonist? Were they born on Earth? Then you can pick their military history. Were they a soul survivor? Were they a ruthless renegade? Were they a war hero? And then finally, you can pick their military specialization and what their personalities. Are they a humorous person? Are they an aggressive person? Are they a diplomatic person? So you've got a couple of channels you can go down. And the later Dragon Age games had that same sort of system where you've got options to pick from. The very first Dragon Age Origins, was unique in that respect in role-playing games and computer games because it was designed as a standalone game that then became so popular that they created a trilogy. So it was a lot more open world. And the biggest difference between Dragon Age 1 and the other Dragon Ages in Mass Effect is that your character was non-voiced. You didn't have a voiced character. So all the other games, Mass Effect, the whole trilogy, you have a voiced character. So the voice actors' intonations and enunciations come through. And the second and third Dragon Age, you can play with your character's background and what they do, but it's still a voiced character. Whereas the original Dragon Age, everyone else in the game is voiced, and your character has a voice when they're getting hit in combat or when they're picking a lock.
They make sounds.
Exactly. But the dialogues are all text-based. So it's a text-based thing, and then people respond to you as if you spoke. And that system allows for so much character development. They're literally, I think someone once calculated, most of the Dragon Age and Mass Effect games, you've got about 300 or 400 pathways you can follow. Dragon Age 1, as a single game with a 35-hour campaign, had about 10,000 variations. It was impossible for someone. It had that many variations because every discussion
could go in different
10,000 variations in the game. So yes, you could do the same thing all the way through and be happy with that.
Yeah.
But I've been playing that game, I think, since 2013. I've been playing it. I still keep finding new things that I didn't see in the game on a previous run through, just by making one conversation different. So there's so many variations. It's in my opinion, it's probably the biggest example of a tabletop system into a computer game because it was meant as a standalone. So they could go really insane with all the different variations of what could happen. Then they found they'd hamstrung themselves with future games because there were too many versions of what people had done. So they had to make some things non-canon and cut out various pathways. And
they had to take away some of the player's agency. Interesting.
Exactly, yeah. But the first one, huge agency.
It's actually really interesting about voiced characters because it's made me think about the new Dead Space release. So the original Dead Space, Isaac didn't have a voice. In the remake, it's voiced. And I've seen a little bit of discussion online about people having a very positive response to that, but also people having a less positive response. And I think it goes to that point you were talking about, in that when it's not voiced, when you don't hear the character, you can use your voice. It's your internal voice. And that can help you feel maybe that does give you more agency. I don't know. even
It
in a
does.
game that's on the rails.
It does. Even if from a mechanics point of view, if the choices are the same, the difference is that how your character thinks about something is very specific. So with the text-based games, you select option 1. Your character has said exactly that, and the NPC will respond. Whereas in the newer games, it might say, for example, diplomatic choice, but your character will say something aggressive or something that's, or the voice tone of the voice actor will make it sound like he's being aggressive, even though you chose the diplomatic option, and that creates a disconnect in. It creates disassociation. Whereas with the text game, that problem's not there. Your character said what you wanted them to say, and in your head, they said it the way you wanted them to say it. So much more, I'm blanking on the word, much more immersive. It's way more immersive.
Yes.
Yeah, which is probably what the game is the opposite to what game developers think. It's like, oh, immersive, I need to use everything. I need to have my motion capture and my voice actor and everything there. Whereas I think, and why I think tabletop RPGs have remained popular, is people want to put their perspective in the game. They want to put themselves in place of the character. And even in first-person shooters, going back to one of the things you said, Shah, I want to go out and shoot things. Now, I know that that's not actually want to go out and shoot things, but you're still putting yourself in the character. This is your throwaway character who I am certain your two compatriots use as a meat shield.
Oh, yes, 100%.
Well, yeah, the other thing is again, Mitch and I will go out and actually shoot things because he's a sport, not really a sports shooter, but is a gun enthusiast. So, we go, Anyway.
But you know what I mean, you know?
It was a good metaphor.
Someone's a party pooper. No, but it's like, it's the same thing. It's when you talk about characters, I wonder, going back to our question where we talked about what an RPG, I wonder if you could make it as simple as it's something where you say my character does as opposed to I do.
Yeah,
and as soon as you start saying I do, it's an RPG.
Yeah, I mean, from that point of view, if you want to take it on a really broad level, Grand Theft Auto, not a game people think of for RPGs, and yet you are. I mean, sure, there is a narrative part of the game where your character's doing whatever they do in cutscenes, but then you got the open world side where you can make your guy, if you want, your guy can go and beat someone up on the street, or he can. For example, the driving. I once had a challenge with a friend of mine where I said, okay, Grand Theft Auto 5, I want you to drive as if you're in the real world. No running over people, no skipping red lights. He spent close to 2 hours, and he got really into the challenge of not breaking any road rules in the game. And for those 2 hours, it became a very immersive role-playing game because all of a sudden he wasn't just playing Grand Theft Auto. He was driving a car in a very busy city with traffic and pedestrians and all that sort of thing around him. So it became an RPG game for him.
Yeah.
Well, I would. I mean, older Grand Theft Autos, you have a character that you play. So GTA 5 being out for just as long as it has been, it's just become what we call GTA now, basically, where you do create your own open world character and you do all of that fun stuff. So I would say that he's created a simulator. It's a sim now because you have like taxi driving sim and bus driver sim and all of that sort of stuff. So at what point are you just simulating an activity and achieving a task? And at what point, like, where is who did that driving is irrelevant. There may not as well have been a character in the car. It could have just been a driving game where all you had agency of is the car.
I mean, Talbot in chat has brought up an interesting point. There's a very thin line between immersive simulation and role play. And I think that's kind of what we're getting at. Yeah.
True.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to say.
Well, leading on that point as well, though, Jared, I partially agree with you as well. You are right that the original games, GTA 1, 2, I think maybe 4, it was exactly that. The character was a simulator, and the statistics were what they were. But then the new in GTA 5, by making a character do something, you actually level up. Like, for example, if you make a character run everywhere, they actually level up their stamina and they become better at running. Now, it's a very, very shallow version of RPGs. But some people might go, okay, I'm going to make my character swim for 20 minutes. And the thing is as well, you can level up different ways. You can make a character climb. You can make them swim. You can make them ride a bike. And the statistic levels up. So you've got different ways to get your character leveled up. Now, in game terms, it makes no difference. It's a statistic that goes up. But someone who's into role-playing can go, this guy got more stamina because he's a swimmer, not because he's a runner.
Yeah.
But although you do have to work a little bit with GTA, I admit. You have to work a bit for that one, but it's there.
Yeah. to swing it to Tarkov the same way, Tarkov is actually going to be and will be an MMO persistent world that you will transition in and out of and will be ongoing. So your character, currently the way the iteration of the game is that you have a wipe, and for a temporary amount of time everybody levels up and you can interact with people of all levels while you're in the shtick, but you lose everything at a wipe and it resets just every couple of months. So that's kind of like starting a new campaign over and over again. It's kind of, and because you also level up your stats by doing that thing specifically in Tarkov. If I just ran around the maps all day, every day, I would be hella fit and I would be able to jump higher and run longer and do all of those things. So you're speccing into it without just using like points or anything like that. You can't do that in Tarkov. You can spec out your guns and your gear deliberately, but your player over time just naturally gets fitter and can jump higher and longer and take more hits and heal quicker and all of that sort of stuff, which is a very interesting way to say, okay, well, my character is also customizable, because if I just snuck around all the time and I just did stealth missions and I crawled through the grass, I'm not going to have stamina for sprinting. I'm not going to be able to jump high. But if I committed to those particular skills, I'm going to be able to mechanically achieve a thing. And then I could just say, yeah, my guy is just really good at jumping, or has done parkour, or just drilled those obstacle courses back at the at cadets. So you can always add a layer of narrative on top. Yes.
Okay, I kind of have a question. So we've been talking a lot about our experience online, games, TTRPGs. Have you ever taken something from gaming and pulled it out of the game? Learned a skill because you thought it sounded cool as a character?
Yes. So when we were in year 10 in high school, it was when I first got into Assassin's Creed, and I thought, wow, this game's awesome, all the jumping and running. And then I Googled it and I found out parkour is a thing. It's actually a sport. And that led me into parkour. And now for the last 5.5 years, I've been training in parkour, and it's amazing. I've gotten so much better. And the thing is, whenever people ask me, why did you start parkour? I go, video games, Assassin's Creed, it looked cool. And it was literally just a Google search and going, oh, it's a real sport. It's not just a video game thing. It actually exists. And then I found out all about the history of parkour and, all the different places you can train and the philosophy behind it as well. And so, I mean, I started, Jared can tell you, I'm dedicated to parkour. I go 3 times a week.
Amazing.
And all of it was triggered because I saw something cool in a video game and I wanted to learn it the correct way. Don't try this in real life without professional stuff.
Oh, please. There's so many opportunities to get training. Please don't try and do it like I did back in high school before Tashar got into it. I haven't been training in years, but we had YouTube. And we really could have hurt ourselves. So don't do that. Go get training. There's gyms all over the place. Or just go to gymnastics classes and learn how to fall safely. That's all. Yeah.
But isn't that interesting? Sorry. And we will put the link in the chat, and we'll also put it down below the video for the VOD about some, good parkour sites. But I think it's really interesting. We've been talking for so long tonight about putting bits of yourself into the character, or how you feel agency in the character. And I think that's an example of, it's actually, I don't know how to phrase it. It's not like the game has agency over you, because that's a whole hole in the internet that we don't need to go down. But it's pulling that, it's that line between you and a character or you and a game. It's not one way. You actually can take things out of that.
Yeah, and I think, definitely. Yeah, and I mean, like for example, when I got into parkour, I wasn't trying to do it because I wanted to be better than my character. For example, that would be being influenced by the game, going, "Oh my god, he just did a 12-meter jump. I want to do that as well."
I'm very glad you never did.
I attempted it once, but that's a different story for another time. But my videos are up on that one, but that's a different story. Nice. But the thing is, like, I didn't go into it to compete against my game character. I went into it because I wanted to use that skill in a real world scenario. And well, then that led to a whole other scenario of training. But the point is that, you have to remember that you don't want to be influenced by the game. Like, for example, playing GTA is not how I learned how to drive. I didn't want to learn how to drive because of Grand Theft Auto. I did not want to learn because Yeah.
Yeah.
Even as a kid in year 3, I knew that that's not how you drive a car in real life. But
I tried, but I couldn't reach the pedals. So wasn't a very tall child. I'm interested though, because one thing we've not talked about, which is in that kind of RPG, I guess, frame, is people who LARP. I mean,
Oh yeah.
yeah, and I don't know if you're a LARPer, Tashar. I'm not. I don't think Jared is. I don't think cosplay counts.
No.
Maybe it does. I don't know.
I have not dressed up and I have dressed up and done D&D sort of, but I have not done the traditional live action role playing.
Yeah, I don't do traditional LARPing in terms of actually going into a scenario and portraying the character, but I have during cosplay things that I've gone for. I have using my skills that I got from gaming and everything. I've been able to turn my cosplay into a LARP. So, for example, you go to an Assassin's Creed event, and I'm one of the few people there who can actually do some of the moves, and it goes from being cosplay turns into a LARP. Plus, I've also got a prop hidden blade, which Jared has seen. It's very cool. Makes a friend of mine built it for me, but it makes it very.
Show me your hands for a second. Let me just see how many fingers you've got. Okay, just checking.
No. I learned the wrist flick method.
Yeah,
but,
nice.
but the thing is, like, not so that's an example of LARPing. Is I don't LARP generally, but I got that prop, and then I specifically spent several weeks in the parkour gym that I train at. I spent weeks learning to do my moves while having that weight, because obviously if you do a parkour move with something on your wrist, you're going to smack it into the walls and break it.
And your balance.
And your balance is out. So I actually had to relearn, well, not learn, I had to adjust a lot of my moves to account for that weight. And the end result is that it looks not exactly, but it looks close to what the game does in real life. And obviously it looks awesome, which is
great. Of course. it looks amazing. Get a link, put that up would be amazing.
I don't have a video of that, but I do have videos where we took lightsabers into apes. So apes is the gym I train at. I took a lightsaber in. We had a blacklight event recently where the whole gym went dark with UV lighting, and then me and 2 other guys brought lightsabers, like expensive lightsabers, and we actually choreographed a lightsaber duel in the middle of the gym.
Nice.
And that became the centerpiece of the night.
That is very cool. And that's really interesting. It talks about, now we're kind of almost verging into virtual reality, and I'm loving the fact that we're talking about RPG and defining it really broadly. Because when I was in high school, I used to go, and I don't know if anyone's from Sydney remembers, there was an underground laser game where you could shoot each other with lasers. And, it was, you normally pay $20, 20 minutes, whatever. We used to go overnight, and we had lots of scenarios. And I'm wondering now how much that was influenced, because obviously I loved role play, how much that was influenced as well. There was no lore, no, but we had names, we had character names, and there was a little bit of backstory around them. Sometimes, I think it was 1 or 2 nights we dressed up. So it's making me wonder. Sure. Yeah, I think that'd be role play.
I'd definitely call that role play. I'd say anything where you take on a character or you take on a persona, I would call that role playing.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point to start wrapping up this evening. So I am conscious of the time. Interesting, Elwaz in the chat says that laser tag was a bit of an intro to role play. So apparently I am not alone, which is amazing.
I was also thinking the same thing. I was like, hang on, like you get, like buzzkill or like something like that. And it which just leads back into the loop of the competitive versus role-play nature. But at the same time, it is. And like you belong to a community, you belong to a team. Yeah. And I would say for me, you become and you act like whatever that might be, and whether you take it seriously or whether you make it silly and you go, wee.
Yeah.
You're doing it. Yeah. You're temporarily kind of stepping into a fully immersive experience when you do that. Yeah. So very easy to then add a personality and act a certain way when you're in that environment.
Absolutely. And I think that I love the way that this conversation has gone. We sort of talked about we started off saying that, we're going to talk about Star Wars and lore and different games and different genres and different mediums that you played in. And we've kind of now taken it about the question of what is an RPG? What is role-play gaming? Yeah. And I love that, because I think one of the really important things is that it's almost a message that we've been, I think, subliminally pushing out through this stream and this series is games are what you want to get out of them, and there is no wrong way to define it. And it's not about having that you are either this or this, that it's really broad, and that is okay as long as you're having fun and everybody around you is having fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think we might start to wrap up. Is that okay with you guys?
We can do that. We've hit that
Amazing.
moment.
I know.
It is
I'm good.
time,
We've
unfortunately.
survived without Ian. We've kept to time. We did it.
We did it, Ian. Be proud of us.
Please be proud of us. Please love us. Tasha, thank you so much for coming on tonight. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
Yeah, I always like making new friends.